So these fats don't only live in our cell membranes. That's where they start. That's where they start their job. But their job doesn't end there. These fats are actually released from the cell membrane and converted into signaling molecules that can either, in the case of omega 6s, turn inflammation on in the cell, or in the case of omega 3s, modulate that inflammatory response, resolve it, and bring cells back to baseline. So during pregnancy, a mother's needs for DHA increase over 800%, because that developing nervous system is just soaking in all the DHA that it can to literally build out its nervous system. So when we're thinking about a brain and our nervous system and the trillions of neurons and synaptic connections that it contains, every single one of those membranes needs DHA to function optimally.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Healthy Habit Podcast. Today we're talking with Kira Barrett, nutritionist with a passion for helping others pave their way towards optimal health and well-being. She holds a degree in Human Nutrition and Dietetics from Colorado State University and enjoys helping others learn about the correlations between the science of nutrients and human metabolism, and then their correlations with vibrant health. And as a Colorado native, she spends her leisure time in the mountains skiing, hiking and rock climbing, and spending time with her baby, two-step kids, and husband. And today we're talking all things Nordic Naturals. Thanks, Kira, for coming on for your first time on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
So tell us a little bit about what led you to get to Nordic Naturals. We've had previous interviews with Nordic on both the podcast and when we were doing the radio show, but we want to hear a little bit about your background as well. What led you to this point?
Absolutely. I graduated from Colorado State University with a bachelor's degree in Human Nutrition and Dietetics. I knew that I really had a passion for not only nutrition, but really the biochemistry of the human body, human metabolism. It's just always really fascinated me. And I found myself working in the natural products industry. And as you might know, once you're in it, you never really leave.
Right.
It's just a wonderful industry where people really care about health, nutrition. So yeah, I've been with Nordic for about 3 years now, educating all over the country, really working primarily in health food stores, helping customers and team members know what's on their shelves and really helping them understand the science behind omega-3 fatty acids primarily, but other essential nutrients as well. So
Which is one of Nordic's specialties, right? Fish oil. That's how a lot of people
yes.
hear about Nordic Naturals as a company. So let's explain it then. What's in fish oil that's so special? That's everybody's heard of it by now, at least 95% of
Yeah.
people. So what's so unique about it from your lens? Why do you find it so
Yeah.
beneficial that you wanted to focus on it?
Absolutely. And you're right that most people by this point have heard of fish oil. They know exactly what it is. Maybe they understand the heart health benefits. Maybe
Right.
they've heard about it from their doctor or read in a magazine. But a lot of people don't quite understand what it is in fish oil that makes it so beneficial. So there are two long chain omega-3s found in fish and fish oil called EPA and DHA. What's really interesting about these two nutrients and omega-3s as a whole is when we're talking about omega-3 fats, we're talking about essential nutrients. And so, in terms of nutritional science, as a reminder for your listeners, in order for a nutrient to be considered essential, it has to meet a couple criteria. The first of those is that the nutrient has to be so important in our cells and in our bodies that deficiency symptoms will develop if we don't get enough.
Mm,
And the second is that the body can't be able to make that nutrient on its own. So we have to consume it through the diet or through supplementation. So when a lot of people are shopping in a health food store and looking for something maybe like curcumin or turmeric or, another really popular item that has a lot of health benefits, they're not, the difference is that they're not looking for something that is necessarily essential to the body, meaning we don't get
right.
like a turmeric deficiency, whereas we get a omega-3 deficiency if we don't consume enough of
Sure.
these fats. So even though they're just fatty acids and we get a lot of fat in the food that we eat, these are essential nutrients that we tend to be very, very deficient in just because of the standard American diet, and the way that we eat generally is very lacking in the essential omega-3 fats.
And most of the
So,
fats people are eating are not the omega-3 fats, right?
right,
It's a
right.
lot of creams and cheeses and like oils. Of course, the seed oil thing's a big thing now on social media,
Mm-hmm.
but seed oils are rich in omega 6s. So, can you tell us
Yep.
real quick the difference in omega 3, 6, and 9? I know there's even more, but those are probably the big
Yeah.
three you'd find in supplements.
Yeah. And I can back up even a little bit further if that
Sure,
might be helpful for your
absolutely.
listeners, because when they hear the word omega, what we're referring to is a polyunsaturated fat. And the omega 3, omega 6, omega 9 is really the classification of how we define polyunsaturated fatty acids. But there's other fats in the human diet too. There's saturated fats, which we get a lot from fats that are solid at room temperature. So,
Right.
like butter, lard, coconut oil, and all fatty acids are long chains of carbon atoms bound to hydrogen. The reason saturated fats are solid at room temperature is because there are no double bonds in that carbon chain. So when they lay one on top of each other, they lay in very flat, a very flat, solid way.
Mm,
Unsaturated fats, on the other hand, have more or one double bond in that molecular carbon chain, which gives it some kinks and some curvature in the fatty acids. So when a bunch of unsaturated fats are together in one place, it becomes liquid at room temperature
got
because
it.
of that molecular structure. So that's when we're looking at like olive oils and um, other things. So really, when we're talking about omega fats, we're really only talking about those unsaturated fatty acids that have one or more double bonds. So omega 6s and omega 3s are the two fats that are considered essential in the human diet. And omega 9s are kind of a different category, which we
Okay.
can talk about later. But as you alluded to, we get so many omega 6s from the food that we eat in the standard American diet. All of the foods that we use to cook and fry food in, or even just processed food, almost all of that contains an omega 6. So,
Right.
soybean oil, corn oil, canola oil, all of these oils that we use to cook and fry food, omega 6. Omega 6s are found very abundantly in nuts, grains,
Exactly. The
seeds.
nuts and seeds too.
So we're getting absolutely plenty, even though they are an essential fatty acid. They're vital to our health, just like the
Right.
omega 3s. We don't need to seek out a supplement of omega 6s because
Sure.
nobody in the Western culture is deficient in the omega 6 fats. So
um, yeah, so that's a really good breakdown. So the omega 9s you said would be in a different category?
yep, omega 9 actually is primarily a mono unsaturated fat. So mono meaning one, there's one double bond in that carbon chain, whereas polyunsaturated fats, there's more than one.
Interesting.
So omega 9s are really a mono unsaturated fat, and they don't fall into that essential category, meaning our bodies can make omega 9s, even though they have a lot of health benefits and they're great for energy production and other things. They're not essential to get in the diet. So really we're looking at 6s and 3s.
Thanks for that reminder on that omega 9s are not essential. That's very true. That's not talked about enough. That's a good point.
Yeah.
And then
Yep.
so then why are these omega 3s so essential though in the cell membrane health and inflammatory control? Because
Yeah.
I know you've obviously heard of the ratio. It should be about 1 to 1 or 1 to 4 omega 3s to 6s. It's more like 1 to 40 plus, 35
Yep.
plus in favoring the
Yep.
6s. So what's the problem there?
Yeah. So there's two reasons that these fats are really considered essential. The first big reason is that they live inside our cell membranes. So every single cell in your body, whether it's a brain cell, a liver cell, a muscle cell, every cell, even
Right.
the tiny little endothelial cells that line your blood vessels, every cell in your body has this outer cell membrane. And when we consume fatty acids from the food that we eat, these fats are shuttled up into the cell membranes of our cells where they make a large structural component of that cell membrane. Our cell membranes are made out of phospholipids. Lipid is a fancy word for fat. So when we have the right kinds of fats making up our cell membrane, they're really going to contribute to the fluidity and flexibility of that cell membrane. And if you remember what I was talking about their molecular structure, because polyunsaturated fats and omega 3s have these double bonds, once they're incorporated into a cell membrane, they give that cell membrane, they lessen the rigidity of it and they make it fluid and flexible. And that's so important throughout the whole body that we have fluid and flexible cell membranes. For example, you need really fluid cell membranes in the brain because our brain cells constantly have to communicate with other cells. They have to send signals and neurotransmitters from one cell to another at an incredibly rapid pace. And all of that fluidity contributes to how all our cell membranes can do that. Another example where that's really important in the body is within arteries of the heart. We don't want stiff arteries, of course, because then it impedes proper blood flow. Whereas if we have really fluid and flexible cell membranes in those arterial walls, we're going to have healthy blood pressure levels and it's going to contribute to cardiovascular health. So the way that these fatty acids are incorporated into cell membranes is really important. But
Right.
as you alluded to, they also really help to modulate the inflammatory process. So these fats don't only live in our cell membranes. That's where they start. That's where they start their job. But their job doesn't end there. These fats are actually released from the cell membrane and converted into signaling molecules that can either, in the case of omega 6s, turn inflammation on in the cell, or in the case of omega 3s, modulate that inflammatory response, resolve it, and bring cells back to baseline. So they really have a huge influence on the ways that our cells are able to handle the inflammatory process, cellular stress. And while both inflammation and the resolution of inflammation are important,
Right.
we can't have one so out of balance that all of a sudden our cells and our bodies are just in this chronic inflammatory state. So those are the two big reasons why they're essential in the body. One is this regulation of cellular stress, and the other is the fluidity that they give to cell membranes.
Tell us a little bit about, so in Japan and other East Asian countries that live on the coast that have a lot of water surrounding them, especially Japan, they eat a lot of algae. So I know there's a lot. Does Nordic have a vegan option? And what are your thoughts on getting that? Or do you think we should get a combination? I mean, I think we should have more seaweed in the diet because it's so rich in iodine. And you see the average Japanese person gets like 56 times the amount of iodine per day compared to the average American. So what are your thoughts on the different options there?
Yeah, that's a really important question. For one, because a lot of people think that they can get their omega-3 fats from plant foods like hemp, flax seeds,
Right.
chia, but those do not contain a direct source of the biologically active omega-3s that we really care about, called EPA and DHA.
Okay.
So the only plant on the planet that contains this direct source of EPA and
Is
DHA
algae?
is algae,
Wow.
which is a little bit different than seaweed. Seaweed is classified as algae, but not all seaweed has omega threes, so
Right.
that's a little bit different if you're wanting the iodine.
Did I say
Um,
seaweed?
for
It
iodine,
should.
you
Did I?
did,
Okay.
yeah.
I should have said
Some
algae.
Yeah, some algae has iodine, but not all of it. And so at Nordic Naturals, we do have an algae product. We have Algae Omega and Algae DHA. And so this is great for our vegetarian or vegan consumers specifically that really need that direct source of EPA. And it's going to be very, very beneficial to those individuals, especially, or for anybody that just can't tolerate fish for whatever reason. The only downside of taking an algae product instead of fish is just going to be that it's a little bit of a lower dose. And
Okay.
because most Americans are so deficient in these fats, a lot of times they might benefit from a higher dose fish oil versus the algae, but it's still a great way to be getting those omega 3s.
Right. You want to look for this product right here through Nordic Naturals. Kind of hard to see there, but okay. You look
And
for Algae Omega. It's actually the number one algae oil brand in the U.S. So, which is important, because you're not going to have the mercury in here, correct? A lot of people are going to ask about
right.
that. What's the
Yep.
mercury and other heavy metal status when it comes to Algae Omega products?
None.
Okay.
Very, very minimal. And
That's not bad.
right, right. We third party test every single batch of product that leaves our doors for environmental contaminants and heavy metals, mercury being the biggest concern of those. And when our third party test results come back, we see mercury levels usually 100 times lower than the strictest international standards for fish oil. So, in general, that international standard for fish oil when it comes to mercury is 0.01 parts per million. And our test results generally come back at 0.0001
Wow.
parts per million mercury. So it would be nearly impossible to get that number to zero, but you know,
Right.
basically zero, 0.0001.
This is
parts per
one, I
million.
want to read
So,
this comment. This is directly from Nordic.com from Mitchell 2 years ago. I recently switched from Ultimate Omega 3X to Omega Algae because I wanted a non animal based fatty acid supplement. So far, I could not be happier. Also, not the only one in the household who gets excited. And then it's a picture of the baby with the product as well, the
oh,
Algae
sweet. That's
Omega.
cute.
So that's available too. That's good to know. It's from Microalgae, correct? That's the
Yes.
original source of
Yep.
marine omega 3. How is that different from other types of algae?
There's just a lot of different algae strains, just as there's a lot of different types of fish, a lot of different animals on the planet. There's a lot of plants in a garden. There's just different strains
Got it.
of algae. So we use a microalgae that, you know,
Yeah, just a different
is
option.
naturally high in EPA and DHA. Yeah.
Perfect. So DHA is another one. So we mentioned EPA and DHA. D as in dog. HA is important, especially in pregnancy, infancy, childhood, and later years for proper cognition, learning, memory, attention, and mood health. So we need DHA, especially for the brain. Is that correct? Can you elaborate a bit more?
Especially for the brain. So, so, so important. So DHA, docosahexaenoic acid, is a 22 carbon omega 3, meaning it is, as far as a carbon chain goes, that's one of the longest chain omega fats in the diet. Because of this long chain length, it is really, really readily incorporated into cell membranes where it contributes to the fluidity and flexibility of that cell. And it is incredibly vital during development for the brain. So during pregnancy, a mother's needs for DHA increase over 800% because
Wow.
that developing nervous system is just soaking in all the DHA that it can to literally build out its nervous system. So when we're thinking about a brain and our nervous system and the trillions of neurons and synaptic connections that it contains, every single one of those membranes needs DHA to function optimally. So when we look at the research, we see DHA very highly correlated with cognitive development, psychomotor development, language development in infants. We see it related to things like decreased risk of preterm birth, um, and healthy birth weight among the pregnant women. But not only that, we see it really highly correlated even into older years when we're looking at like attention and focus in the classroom for kids. And this is because of the way DHA really helps those neuronal membranes to send and receive neurotransmitters. It can help with dopamine levels and receptors. So we see it very highly correlated in the research when it comes to cognitive health, brain health. And that's why DHA is really kind of thought of that neck up structural fat that's so important, especially in those early years of life.
Compared to EPA, which isn't as necessary for the brain, but it does a whole host of other things, right? We're talking
Yep.
specifically central nervous system development and brain health. So is the DHA going to be higher in most of the formulas? I know there's even a standalone DHA product.
Yeah, we never isolate one omega-3 over the other. So in all of our products, you'll always find both, even if
Got
it's a
it.
small amount. That's because we really believe these fats are always found together in nature and they do function best in the body when they're together. Our ultimate omega, for example, is going to be a little bit higher in EPA than it is in DHA, just because that's the natural ratios of the fish that we're sourcing. But if you're looking at a product like DHA, DHA extra, Omega memory, Omega focus, anything that's cognitive brain related, we've specifically concentrated that DHA to be higher milligram amounts to really support the brain. So, and what's interesting is even though we're talking about cognition and how important DHA is, EPA is also very important to help support a stable mood and to help keep that inflammatory process and cellular stress levels regulated.
Interesting. Yeah,
So,
they're both
yeah.
doing different things. Can you share some recent studies that might come to mind when it comes to DHA? I know in the show notes here, I wanted to discuss some studies with you.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been so many that have come to light in recent years and a lot of big reviews and meta-analyses as well. So of course I mentioned when we look at research in infancy, we're seeing psychomotor development and language development with infants and mothers who are supplementing with DHA during breastfeeding in those years. But there's a lot of really specific studies that have come out more recently too, even when it comes to kids and their learning and comprehension in the classroom. There was one study that was published in 2017. This was in the Journal of Psychopharmacology, I believe. And it looked at school age boys aged 6 to 10 or somewhere in there. One of the groups was supplemented with DHA, the other group was not. And then their reading comprehension and reading speed was analyzed. And they found really significant improvements in the children's reading speed and their comprehension after they had been supplementing with DHA for 6 weeks. We see very similar results when we're looking at hyperactivity and inattention in the classroom, which is a really common behavioral reported problem among parents. So we see a lot of similar results when it comes to, reports of behavior after children have been supplementing with DHA as well.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, like more
yeah.
calm. They're not as
Mhm.
erratic and impulsive and just,
Yep.
yeah.
And just that ability to stay focused, and things like that. And then, of course, looking into the later years of life when we're more concerned about age-related cognitive decline, really looking into memory.
Okay.
There's been a lot of studies that have come out recently too about decreased rates of age-related cognitive decline when a cohort or a group of individuals who are reaching their later years of life are supplementing with DHA versus those that are not. So,
Got it. So perfect. And then you even mentioned there's multiple options here when it comes to DHA and just Nordic Naturals products in general. We have the children's DHA gummies, the baby's DHA, prenatal DHA. So there's different stages that you would introduce these, correct?
yep.
Um, can you tell a little bit more about that and like the children's, what age cutoffs? And we have people coming in all the time. Is there a safe product for my 2-year old, when it comes to DHA? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and luckily at Nordic Naturals, we have a product for every age, every category, every health challenge. So we've got our prenatal DHA that, of course, we're really going to recommend to the pregnant woman, especially in that third trimester of pregnancy. And then we move on to baby's DHA. So that's going to be really, really good for maybe a formula fed infant that isn't getting breast milk or a mom who doesn't have enough DHA for that reason. And that's measured by weight, as far as the baby's weight, how much you're going to give a day. And then we move up into children's DHA extra. That's going to be good for 2 years up until like 6. We have Ultimate Omega Junior, Ultimate
Okay.
Omega Teen. We have gummy chews. We have liquids, soft gels. So really, we have a product for everybody.
And maybe we can close off on the memory support product in the last 3 minutes or so here. We're talking with
Yeah.
Kira Barrett of Nordic Naturals. Let's dive. Is that one standalone product there? It's called memory support, and then it's split up into
Yes.
the phosphatidylcholine, the huperzine A. Tell us about this product.
Yeah, this is a phenomenal product. It's probably one of my favorites. You're going to find that high quality, award winning fish oil that we use in all of our products with a higher ratio of DHA, because again, we're looking at supporting memory and cognitive health. And then we have Longvita optimized curcumin. Curcumin is a phytonutrient, obviously the active constituent in the turmeric root that has been very widely studied for helping to reduce cellular stress. It's an antioxidant. It's very good in the brain. The problem with curcumin is that it's really hard to absorb when taken orally. So we've used an optimized curcumin that has been clinically shown to cross the blood-brain barrier and do its really important work in the brain. This is because each curcumin molecule is kind of encased in what we call a liposome, which is going to
Mm-hmm.
be absorbed like the fats that we eat. So really, really good brain nutrient there. It was formulated actually with a group of scientists at UCLA who came up with this liposomal technology for the curcumin. And then we've added phosphatidylcholine, which is an important source of the nutrient choline, but it's also a phospholipid. So again, it's really going to help with those neuronal connections, the cell membranes within our neurons. It's going to act as a precursor to the neurotransmitter acetylcholine, which is a really important neurotransmitter involved in learning and memory. And then lastly, we've got the huperzine A, which is a Chinese herb that's been used for centuries for cognitive health. And again, it can actually increase levels of acetylcholine in the brain and help with learning and memory in that way too. So great formula for anybody looking for cognitive health at
Right.
all.
Yeah, and it's unique. Not it's those four aren't typically found in memory and brain products, right? Like you mentioned turmeric, which is often just
Yeah.
thought about for pain, right? So
Hmm.
yes, it can help with memory as well. You can look in India
Yeah.
how much turmeric is consumed there nationwide. They have much lower rates of Alzheimer's and dementia and other types of brain neurodegenerative disorders. But obviously, it's not just the
Yeah.
turmeric, but that's a key part of it. We do have research on turmeric and dementia, if you can mention that real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the biggest areas of research when it comes to turmeric is how well it's able to actually get into the brain
Wow.
and then work as an antioxidant and really help to reduce cellular stress within those neurons. And you're right, when we measure brain levels of turmeric in people whose natural diets contain a lot of turmeric, we see a lot up in the brain. So great nutrient for that as well.
Amazing. So we'll finish off then with a quick take home message here, and you can people are listening to us as they're shopping in the store right now, Kira. So you can give a recap on Nordic Naturals, which is the number one selling brand of fish oil in the U.S., both for fish, actual fish oil, but then algal oil as well, which is becoming more popular amongst the vegetarians and vegans. So people are coming in all the time looking for brain support and a fish oil or EPA DHA. What's a good take home for Nordic Naturals?
Yeah, absolutely. A couple big take homes. The first is just going to be the care that we take it with processing our oils. It goes through a molecular distillation process, bottling and shipping process that is completely oxygen free. So when looking at fish oil and omega 3s, they're very, very delicate molecules. And you want to make sure that you're not getting a rancid or an oxidized product that's going to leave customers with that fish burp or that negative experience. So at Nordic Naturals, we always guarantee no negative fish burp or experience like that because of our exceptional
Right.
processing. And then also is just going to be sustainability. Of course, people are very concerned with the health of our oceans, overfishing, all of those things that are really important. And we really care deeply at Nordic Naturals about sustainable sourcing, making sure we're taking care of our planet and the oceans, um, and everything like that. And then again, just knowing that we have such a wide array of products for every age, every person, vegetarian or not. So
Amazing. Kira, perfect place to end it there. Thank you for your
great.
time, and I look
Yeah.
forward to our next discussion.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. We'll see you next time.